Oni Ojukwu Mantenso, UnstoppableVocals.com. Culture of Make-Believe by Derrick Jensen. Preface. In 1918, the husband of Mary Turner, a black woman from Valdosta, Georgia, was killed by a mob of white men, not for any offense he had committed, but rather because another black man had killed a white farmer. I do not know precisely how Turner's husband died. I do not even know his name. I know only that in retaliation for the killing of the white farmer, many white citizens of Valdosta lynched 11 black men who were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong skin color, before they shot and killed the man they were after. In the wake of her husband's murder, Mary, who was 8 months pregnant, vowed to avenge him. An Associated Press article later commented on her unwise remarks, noting that the people, in their indignant mood, took exception to her remarks as well as her attitude. If you dig beneath the delicate language, it is easy to see what was coming. A mob of several hundred white men and women determined they would teach her a lesson. Or perhaps more precisely, they would teach a lesson to those others who might be tempted to act as she did. They tied her ankles together and hung her upside down from a tree. Then they doused her clothes with gasoline and burned them off of her. They used a hog-splitting knife to open her belly. Her infant fell to the ground and cried briefly until someone crushed its head with his heel. The mob then shot her. Not once or twice, but hundreds of times. Now, let's remove ourselves from the emotionally safe dustbin of history to another death that happened in 2001. This person who died, I do not know her name or very much about her except that she was 17 years old, was one of about 40 people killed over Easter weekend in Alto Naya in Colombia. Her killers were what these days we call a death squad. I do not know what the members of the death squad said to her or the other people from her village before they killed her, any more than I know what the members of the mob said to the husband of Mary Turner. I do not know what they were thinking or feeling, nor do I know the set of their faces. I do not know whether they laughed or spat or whether they were simply doing what they felt needed to be done. I know only that when her body was later exhumed, it was discovered that members of the death squad had cut off her hands with a chainsaw and used that also to open her belly and throat. It is as easy as it is unwise to simply throw up our hands in the face of these acts, declare them incomprehensible, or just as safely, having nothing whatsoever to do with any of us. I've never stuck anyone with a knife, nor even aimed a chainsaw at a human being. I just don't understand how someone could do this. Maybe they're just evil. But are the actions really so difficult to understand? And do they really have nothing to do with us? What do we make of the fact that in the aftermath of the killing of Mary Turner and the others, 500 black people quietly and quickly left Valdosta for greener, or at least safer, pastures, leaving plenty of fine farmland ripe for new tenants, including those who never held a rope, gun, or knife? Similarly, is it significant that in Colombia, U.S. oil companies, including a company for which George W. Bush was a board member before becoming President of the United States, operate in the regions where these death squads kill most routinely? The texture and direction of this book was deeply informed by the deaths, the killings of these 4 human beings, and by a desire to understand not only the meanings of these deaths, but the threads that tie them together. What is the precise relationship between our economic system and hate? Is there a relationship between economics and race? If so, what is it? And as long as we're delving into the destructive activities of our culture, what about our seeming antipathy toward women? Why also, I wanted to know, the shift in the frontier where the most grotesque of these atrocities are committed? Thousands of black men and women were lynched in this country in the first 20 years of the 20th century. Not so often now, though, do we see black men hanging long-necked from lampposts. Is this country now colorblind, as much mainstream discourse would have us believe? For that matter, is colorblindness a good thing? Are there certain economic and social conditions that facilitate, even call forth certain forms of atrocity? And are there other economic and social conditions that require other forms of making certain that people's attitudes do not become too unwise? There is something else I've wanted to explore while writing this book, having to do with perception, or rather the lack of it. Let's be honest. The activities of our economic and social system are killing the planet. Even if we confine ourselves merely to humans, these activities are causing unprecedented privation as hundreds of millions of people, and more today than yesterday, with probably more tomorrow, go their entire lives with never enough to eat. Yet curiously, none of this seems to stir us to significant action. And when someone does too stridently point out these obvious injustices, the response by the mass of people seems so often to be that which was meted out to Mary Turner, a figurative, if not physical, blow to the gut, leading inevitably to a destruction of our common future. Witness the enthusiasm with which those native nations that resisted their conquest by our culture have been subdued, and the eagerness with which this same end is today brought to those, native or not, who continue to resist too strongly. How does this come to happen in both personal and social ways? My book, A Language Older Than Words, was a deeply intimate exploration of, among many other things, the complex relationship between domestic violence and how this violence tricks out on a grander social scale. This book you hold in your hands is not quite so personal, in great measure because while I suffered directly from violence within my family, my father raped my mother, my sister, and me, and beat everyone in my family but me. I have not suffered from, but rather at least indirectly benefited by whatever racism exists in our society. So in some senses, this book is more about racism, and far more broadly, hate as it manifests in our Western world, from the inside. I have no interest in reproducing Black like me. I leave it to Black people to interpret their experience of living in our culture, and to Indians their experience, and women theirs. Instead, it falls to me, and others of my race and gender, to explore and articulate, and thus I hope help to halt the white male experience of this hatred. How did we come to enslave one continent, significantly depopulate another, and work our will on all of the others? How, in short, have we come to conquer the world? Why have we wanted to do this in the first place? And can we stop wanting it? Although the tectonic psychosocial movements of history can be interesting, in and of themselves, they are meaningless. Any exploration of them must return to the personal, to the particular, because that's all we've got. There is a sense in which the entire history of white enslavement of Africans was of no importance whatsoever to Mary Turner in her last moments. What probably mattered to her most in her last seconds of consciousness was that her skin hurt terribly from the flames. Her belly hurt more than I can imagine from its gaping wound. Her heart was broken, having witnessed first her husband's death and then her child's head being crushed under a man's boot, and that she knew in a few moments she too would be dead. But it is as dangerous as it is tempting to discuss her death without discussing the larger social context that led to it, far more surely than her unwise remarks, and I would say just as surely as the gasoline, knife, and bullets. This is where I hope this book will be of some use. If we wish to stop the atrocities, we will need to understand and change the social and economic conditions that cause them. There was another person killed in Alto Naya, Colombia, whose death deeply informed this book. I've written it partly in homage to him, even though I do not know his name. But I know that when a member of the death squad came to shoot him, he wrested the gun from the man's hands. Unfortunately for him, he did not know how to use it. Presumably, he had never before fired a gun. He was overpowered, tied to a tree, and killed with a chainsaw. This book is a weapon. It is a gun to be put into the hands of all of us who wish to oppose these atrocities, and a manual on how to use it. It is a knife to cut the ropes that bind us to our ways of perceiving and being in the world. It is a match to light a fuse.